Hi, thank you for joining us. This is the first webinar that we've done as part of our Beyond Coronavirus series. We came up with the idea of doing two different sets of webinars, one focused on events that we've been seeing in the financial markets over the course of the recent weeks, and this series, which is going to be looking a bit more at some of the thematic ideas that we've been implementing into our portfolios, taking a kind of glimpse at what's been going on in the markets, some of the changes that we've seen because of the impact of the virus as it spread around the world, and how that's changed both some consumer consumption patterns, but also what we've been doing at a portfolio level, just to try and protect our portfolios for our clients, and also as we're starting to look beyond coronavirus. Next week, we're going to be looking a little bit at the idea of e-commerce, whether that's going to essentially kill standard retail. Today, our topic is video games. I'm going to be choosing different members of the team to participate in these conversations on a weekly basis going forward. Today, I've got three of my colleagues, Mikhail, Maxat, and Joseph. We've been having a conversation about the whole concept of what's been happening in the industry, where are the video games going from a developmental perspective, and some of the challenges that the industry might be facing. About a year ago, we did our first update when we started looking at the industry, and even since then, we've seen some quite large changes. So just to throw a question out to the three of you guys, if you kind of look back at your first memory of the video games, just talk us through kind of your first interaction with what how you experienced the industry.
My first experience with the industry, I think, was an Ant game back in 95 or 96, where you just had to, you were the queen and you just had to start your ant colony. And you had, I remember being afraid of lawnmowers, for example, because they would just ravage everything, and then you'd have to start all over again.
What about you, Max?
I think my first experience with video games was back when I was 5 years old or 6 years old. I was at home playing Sega. I don't remember the specific games, but I've been pretty active from my childhood and up to the teenage years old.
And Mikhail?
So my first experience also was on Sega. It was 1993, I think. I was in second year of my primary school, and I was playing, Mortal Kombat, and I was playing just several series of this Mortal Kombat, like first, second, third, fourth, I think, and I end up on fourth, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, Sega obviously was doing fairly well at this point in the evolution of video games, because my first interaction was on the Sega Mega Drive 2. I was playing Road Rash 2 and a few other games. If we kind of step back and look at the concept of gaming in terms of the interaction, some of the social interactions that we're seeing, obviously there's been an incredible development on the graphics side, and this idea of sort of peer gaming, where you can be playing against 90, 100, sometimes even 150 different people in the same game. Now we're in this period where we're kind of, the four of us are in our respective houses, and we're in a position where we have a little bit more free time to game. I think the stereotypical view of a gamer, where you kind of have a teenage kid with his headphones on, tucked away in his bedroom, playing some sort of nerdy, geeky game, that's kind of changed significantly. What is the sort of modern day gamer?
That's actually a very good point. And I think even for me personally, the revelation, big revelation was to find out that gamer is a much wider part of a population today than it used to be. So for example, if you look at it from an age perspective, there are as many players over 30 years old as younger than 30 years old. And there are almost as many female players as male players. So if you think about it, that's That's a very interesting point. And although females do not particularly consider themselves as gamers when they are playing, for example, Candy Crush on their mobile phones, but nevertheless, it is a video game. So it still counts towards the industry total number. And another key aspect is if we look at gamers today from an income perspective, 2/3 of them are considered either middle or high level income, and over half of total gamers are full-time employed, and they have kids. They even play with their family sometimes. So I guess that paints a very probably different picture from compared to like stereotypical that Simon just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we've seen, that we keep reading about how people are at home with nothing to do, so have more time to game. I think the four of us have been working as hard as ever since we sort of transitioned to this working from home mode. The idea of social gaming, but also now at the moment social working, in terms of, I know Mikhail, you have children, so you're then sort of trying to do this balancing between working, maybe your children are starting to move into this gaming. When we kind of step back and look at the industry from a sort of cost perspective, but before that gaming time, you know, what have we kind of seen in terms of amount of time that people are gaming at the moment?
So I think that current situations, working from home, COVID-19 pandemic, and measures undertaken by governments forced people being locked down in their houses, obviously create some boost for the industry overall. And early evidence suggests that actually number of users are growing. We can see that in March, for instance, I saw some data in US, in Europe, a number of the software downloads increased by around 50%. Demand on console hardware actually doubled. Because of obviously people have more time to play, and I saw some survey when gamers was asking a very simple question: why they playing current? And 45% of them just replied they just simply have more time to play. It's interesting that major titles, platforms, they citing record spikes in players counts. For instance, I've seen that Steam is a popular gaming platform, reported that now it sees highest ever number of their concurrent players. So as I remember, it managed to reach us around 24 million as of middle of April.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from my side, whether we're kind of on like a Wednesday or a Saturday, it feels the same in terms of we're going through this working from home process. One of the things that I found odd is the absence of live sport that's on the TV. And it's interesting to see how the sort of video games industry has been helping to fill some of this void.
Yeah, so that's a good point, especially on esports. This is something, a concept that we spoke about last summer, the rise of esports and how esport is slowly becoming like traditional sports. So to this extent, we could actually say that today esports is the only broadcasted sports that's live on TV. We saw the Formula One championship launching their virtual Grand Prix, which had a total number of viewers of 3.2 million. And of this, we had 1.2 million switching on their TV, broadcasted live on, I think it was ESPN in the US. This is because typically both esports and traditional sports, when they hold their championship, their competition, it always takes place in physical locations such as arenas or stadium. What esports have been able to do is transition from physical locations to online locations, I'd say, where they've been holding their competitions, respecting the quarantines. This means that they've been able to continue to attract viewers. They've managed to keep how do you call it, engagement from fans, and this has obviously attracted normal, I'd say traditional sports, and think about esports as a different way of keeping interaction and entertainment.
I think there was a news story that I was reading about in terms of increasingly you've got professional football players playing FIFA, which is obviously one of the blockbuster titles that Electronic Arts has. And we've also seen some of the Formula One players sort of playing on the Formula One simulators. If we kind of look at briefly some of the macro data that we've seen in terms of jobless claims in the US reaching, north of 20 million, when we're starting to kind of cast our eyes around at what options do we have from an entertainment perspective. We do, as humans, we need to eat, we need to drink, but we also need entertainment, especially when we're in this isolation phase. What kind of options do we have at the moment?
That's a very, very good question. And unfortunately, within the current situation, there are not many options available for people around the world. And this is why we've seen, as George just mentioned, traditional sports referring to video games and esports. It's a continued engagement with their fans. But what I would like to highlight is one of the key aspects of video games. It's value for money, or it's low cost per hour. And what we have seen is a study a couple of years ago highlighted that video games on average cost less than 50 cents per hour. And the only cheaper option is streaming video on Netflix. But again, if we think about, if we compare those two options, video games are much more engaging, much more interactive, and there's also a social aspect to this, and literally all other major options, starting from streaming and up to live sports and concerts, first significantly more expensive, and second, are not possible within the current situation.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that the social aspect has to be key, because it's become so easy for even the four of us to log on and not just to game together, but it's the communication that can happen during the game. But where do we go from here? I mean, Mikhail mentioned the Steam concurrent players have increased significantly. This is when everybody's stuck at home, everybody's looking for entertainment. Video games provide a cheap option to that. So we've kind of seen this rise in players, rise in downloads. But what is the future? And I think before we hit that unanswerable question, as we will kind of gaze into our crystal balls, the concept of what we're doing in the Beyond Coronavirus series is kind of how do we reflect that in our portfolio? So Misha, you're our equity PM. Can you take us through kind of what we're sitting on at the moment and why in our portfolio briefly?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I would like to comment on unanswerable question. So what's going to happen after this situation with lockdowns will end, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I still think that this part of this rise in since early March will stay with us. So if we're talking about Steam, so it's just around 40% increase compared to the early March levels. And if we, like, based on the survey, which I already mentioned, which 45% percentage of respondents reported they just have more time to play. But if we just exclude 45%, it still will leave us with substantial growth. Basically, I think that video games will get boost, and it will not end up just going back to the levels it's been in the early March. So speaking about positions, we have stocks of Electronic Arts and Tencent in our portfolios. We bought it last summer, and it's the longest standing positions in our portfolios. These are two really different companies. First of all, Electronic Arts is a AAA game producer. AAA games, ordinary big games which are designed to capture large audience, several millions of users. It also requires huge capex. But the beauty of FIFA, which is a major electronic arts title, is that actually it requires absolutely different type of capital expenditures. It requires for electronic arts to renew licenses with major football leagues, but not requires maybe high development cost. Because of they told me that they need just to change some jerseys, stadiums, and just that's it. That's all development cost. If we're talking about outreach, company actually global is also good. It can give us exposure to global market. FIFA mostly playing from console. Also, what is good about Electronic Arts is that it can use cash from FIFA to develop more games, and finally we can end up just having one more blockbuster. Speaking about the second company, Tencent, it provides Asia exposure in terms of geography, and it's good because of Asia is the fastest growing region within video gaming industry. It also can give us exposure to different investment themes because of it, not only video games, but rather can capitalize on emerging market consumer growth, can capitalize us on shifting our life to online, which is also good in current environment when we can't interact with each other and go to big shopping malls. Speaking about particular video gaming sector of Tencent, it actually owns a platform when third-party developers, third-party publishers can publish their small games, ordinary small games. And it's just like Apple Store. When developers publish their software and platform just charges them part of their revenue. Yeah, so that's it. These two companies sitting in our portfolios. Also, I would mention that they was doing good during the last sell-off. You know that it was so wild the market moves in March, but companies managed to withstand this volatility and staying in positive territory. I think Electronic Arts around 6% up year to date, Tencent around 10% up year to date, which is actually good. So we glad to have these companies in our portfolios and continue to keep this, I think. Yeah.
Perfect. I think just to sort of start to wrap up, from our side, whether we're looking at number of players on Steam, number of game downloads, the benefit seems to have been, very positive over the last 1 to 2 months. If we start to look ahead and we're all in a position where nobody really knows how long this isolation phase is going to last for, do you think there are some potential negative consequences of the virus that could eventually hit the video games industry?
I was actually going to cut you just before because Misha said something that was quite interesting when he was talking about AAA games development. This is one headwind that we've been discussing together and that we're starting to actually see with companies coming out from this. AAA games typically require larger teams with a lot of powerful computers to develop the game. This is obviously very complicated to transition from office work, day-to-day office work, to working from home. So we've seen this, companies like Sony delaying one of their biggest blockbuster game indefinitely. So we actually have no idea when this is going to come out. So this obviously from a revenues perspective is quite negative. On the other side, again, touching back on what Misha said with AA games and how Tencent is also well positioned. On both sides is that AA games don't need as many big teams or big powerful computers, etc. And the transition is actually way smoother to continue developing games on the AA side. So these headwinds are in some ways mitigated with both EA and Tencent. There's also other issues that come into course, like the supply chain disruptions that we've been seeing. This typically, I think I had a chat with Max on this. He was telling me that some companies have come out with regards to this.
Yeah, let me just quickly add a couple of comments here. Is that what we've observed is that Nintendo, for example, put on pause the sales of the Nintendo Switch gaming platform because they had difficulties with sourcing parts for the Switch. Also, Sony as well announced that they will cap the production of the PlayStation 5 at 6 million for the first year. They didn't specifically mention coronavirus, but I mean, considering the global state of supply chains, we think it might at least contributed partially to the decision.
Perfect. Misha, anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, so basically 2 points I would highlight. So first of all, I recently heard a call with the CEO of Embracer. It's a AA game producer, and they provided update given COVID-19 situation. And they also highlighted that for AA game producers, because of they operating in small groups and literally like a family, so much easier for them just to adopt to this environment, which actually support Joseph's point. Also, I would highlight that I already mentioned mobile part of video games, and if you think about market, so video gaming is good market, double-digit growth, but within this market, mobile was growing like incredible. It was almost 30% of annualized growth over the last several years, and I think it's important to get exposure to mobile, and I think that it also overlap with one more thing which we highlighted in our latest quarterly piece. We have a part which specifically talking about infrastructure, and the part of infrastructure is 5G networks. And we thinking that there is a chance that world governments can include 5G networks into roadmaps to help economies after COVID-19 pandemic. And we're thinking that if we will have a wider 5G network adoption, it will provide us with faster internet, and also, most importantly, with high latency rate. And in this case, we can play by using our phones literally from everywhere, from forest, from middle of city. We will not longer require to staying under coverage of fast Wi-Fi internet. So this, I think, also will help to rise mobile share. So I don't think, so basically my point is it's very important to be exposed to mobile component of video games, video gaming industry, and it's only 45% share at the moment. And we see upcoming drivers which can boost this share going forward.
And all of the people that like to play video games in the middle of the forest will be very happy to hear that.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
I think from my side, as you kind of touched on throughout this, you know, video games has stepped in to fill part of the entertainment void that we've had, I think, collectively in the last couple of months. The social aspect of gaming, which has changed considerably from video games back in the 50s with the sort of first tic-tac-toe through Pong, through Pac-Man. So you know, the idea of video games has changed substantially. How we sort of interact with one another on the video games has changed substantially. The sort of virtual reality concept doesn't quite seem to have taken off yet, and I think that's kind of been more overtaken by the desire for people to play against each other and kind of have more of that social interaction. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Just in terms of looking forwards a little bit, you know, this week on the Dolfin discussion side, we've had a really interesting conversation about energy and some of the recent movements in the energy market with the front month WTI going negative for the first time in history. Obviously the video games chat that we've just been going through, but moving into next week, the Dolfin discussions is going to be focused on fixed income ETFs and looking at some of the dislocations that we saw in the bond market and some of the sort of liquidity mismatches that exist within that particular investment opportunity. And on the Beyond Coronavirus series, we're going to be focused more, as I said at the beginning, on the retail and this migration to e-commerce that we're seeing. We hope you found this an interesting chat. We have produced research on EA and Tencent. They do sit within our portfolio, both as part of our video games thematic idea, but also within our resilient coronavirus basket. And we're going to continue to explore other stocks, ideas, and opportunities over the coming weeks. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.